we should address, like, we've had many conversations about OpenAI and how cool their technology is and the App Store and all of that,
Well, I don't
right?
think the App Store
And
is
I
that
think,
cool, but
okay, well, you hadn't followed the announcement at the time of that podcast, as our listeners have pointed out to us, for Sam not knowing what we were talking about.
More or less. Is it no or is it yes? We'll debate the text that's best when we get more or less. Dave and Britt plus Sam and Jess. Put it all right to the test. More or less.
Aloha, hello. How are you guys doing?
We're just, living out Thanksgiving week on family vacation and dealing with the OpenAI saga. What about you guys?
Well, first of all, welcome to my surf shack, which is apparently also an excellent podcast studio, given our Starlink connection inserts here. So
You've traded a pool house for a surf shack.
I know. I'm really delighted. I could do a whole pod about the surf shack, but I won't. We were going to be off this week. We had a plan B. We were going to bring you all some archival ancillary content. But something happened around someone named Sam in Tech.
not me.
Who's not this Sam in Tech. And so we felt we had to bring you the pod. So hello to everyone listening to this. I don't know exactly when it's going to come out because we're aiming to do it fast because the situation is so fluid, but we've got the full quad here to give you all the news on OpenAI that the information has been breaking, all the hot takes, all the back channel conversation. What am I missing?
Not much. Let's go.
Some jokes,
Okay.
Maybe a few
We're
jokes.
bring all the energy from our lack of sleeping.
I mean, I've been sleeping fine.
Me too.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad you've all been sleeping fine. I thought I'd kick it off with a recap for those who A, don't remember, or B, are so tired that they don't remember what brought us to this place. And then I think our goal is going to be to kind of talk about the bigger picture here, which I think is why the story is so important and also has the benefit of hopefully being relevant no matter what outcome happens after we've taped this pod. So let's see. On Friday, we should say, we don't usually say when we're taping because then it gets stale. So that's like bad podcasting practice. But we're taping this on Tuesday afternoon. But 4 days ago, Sam Altman, we've talked about many times on this pod, the CEO of OpenAI, was fired. And we and the world were treated or notified by this from a letter from the OpenAI's board of directors, claiming that it was for not being consistently candid with the board. I don't know about you guys, but pardon me, Sam?
You got to be consistently candid.
I mean, has anyone made the consistently candid T-shirts? Because
that's actually great.
You can count on this pod to be consistently candid.
We're going to add it to our merch shop.
We're consistently candid, we think, right now. But, and so I don't know. I mean, actually, what did you guys immediately think when you saw that? Like what came to mind?
I thought, there goes my Thanksgiving vacation.
Okay.
Just to push you on that, again, with love and respect, I know why Jessica has been working 24 hours a day. Why has this ruined your Thanksgiving? Because to me, it's just kind of like great gossip. Has very little bearing
Sam,
in my life.
She did not say it ruined her Thanksgiving. She said it made for a very interesting Thanksgiving.
But like, what's your angle for that? Who's calling you?
I've never seen the popcorn emoji used as much as the last 4 days because it's like every hour there's something new happening. It's like, I need to watch this episode of Succession because the next episode's coming fast. And I'm just supposed to be unplugging this week and with my kids. And now there's this huge tech saga that we haven't seen the likes of in 30 years unfolding before our eyes. So,
or in 3 months, but who's counting? But
I don't know. But I'm not discounting all of the work all the journalists and Jessica in particular have been doing that I haven't been doing and not sleeping. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, I thought I was in for a very different type of Thanksgiving week than what's happening now.
I'm with you. The reason I ask is because I personally, this is like my Kardashians on steroids. Like, this is hilarious, right?
Same.
And it's like I couldn't be. I mean, it's good. TV's a little slow, except for Shorzy's back, and other than Shorzy, like this is it. But again, like there's an argument that people are calling. I was wondering whether people in your world are calling you freaking out about like what their AI future solution is.
Well, can I tell you something that did happen? Here I am trying to get a peaceful night's sleep Sunday night, and it's 5 a.m. And my husband, who happens to be Dave here on this podcast, wakes up somehow and goes, "What's up? I know, I can't believe it either. What the hell is happening?" And I'm like, first of all, you're going to wake the baby who's literally asleep 10 feet away. Second of all, it's 5 a.m. What are you doing? And it's somebody from our back channel. I won't say who, but they were just like broing out about the next big saga that just unfolded. And I'm like, this is crazy.
Okay. So Sam, I think you raise a good point. There is this, let's return to the conversation of why people are fixated with this, because I think that is in fact a fascinating piece of this and maybe even playing into it somehow. But okay, you want me to speed up the timeline is what I'm taking away from this. So Sam was fired. The board made it seem like corporate malfeasance. Usually when a board issues something like that, there's fraud, there's something. Instantly the information others were reporting that Sam had no knowledge of an investigation. The picture was very unclear. And really, there appeared to be a power struggle with OpenAI's chief scientist, former co-founder and board member, and Sam over the future direction of the technology. So the narrative that quickly emerged was that whatever transpired, and I still don't think we know maybe even half of what transpired, but it was really related to this tension many people have long pointed out in OpenAI, began as a nonprofit, became under Sam Altman a for-profit in partnership with Microsoft to push to commercialize the technology, in part to make the money needed and to have a structure where it could partner to train its models and raise the capital it needed to do this. But what we understand now is obviously that has had huge ramifications internally on the politics at OpenAI, in big part, but we don't know if that's the only reason leading to this situation, which is still very unclear. Over the weekend, there were talks. Many employees, including the senior leadership, including the interim CEO, were very upset by this, started partnering, colluding with Sam and OpenAI's president, Greg Brockman, to get them back. Those talks failed. The same night, Sam and Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, announced that Sam was going to Microsoft with Greg to start a new artificial intelligence research lab. Microsoft said it would hire anyone from OpenAI who wanted to join. Hours later, 700-ish OpenAI employees said they would resign if the board wasn't pushed out and Sam and Greg were reinstated, and negotiations continue. So we've got really interesting issues about the direction of this technology. We've got personal and perhaps petty power struggles. We have major questions around governance, how a nonprofit board that wasn't even fully staffed could make a move like this and clearly fail to communicate its reasons. And we've got also, I think, like a fair amount of just pure old Silicon Valley employee activism at this point, right? And I think a really interesting story there. So I think that is the state of play. We can take this in a lot of directions. But Dave, what are your big picture takeaways as of the taping of this? And if I take a phone call, you'll know it's one of 4 people, and I will be right back.
Just leave your audio on, Jess, if that happens.
Yeah.
Well, I would add one bullet point to your list there. And I think we also have religious fundamentalism at play here, which I want to I guess, put a fine point on, which I've been talking about it quite a bit in the back channel. But I think that, whatever side you're on the inside of this struggle, whether it's the Sam side or the Ilya research side, I think we have to point out that, this is a struggle around ideology to some extent. And I think, like you said, Jess, there's a bunch of stuff that we don't know. I think there's probably some very big things that we don't know. But focusing on what we do know, the research side of the AI community is largely a secular, almost always talks in a deeply religious tone. They've made the AI, in particular the AGI technology, into almost a sacred. They've almost deified this technology, and I think this is
and by AGI, you mean the idea that? Well, unpack that for people. Like, what is that?
The
what is
idea
the
here
about?
is that OpenAI was set up as a nonprofit organization to keep humanity safe in the case that AGI, artificial general intelligence, which has become the kind of moniker that we and everybody has started to use to talk about this technology and its kind of end or penultimate state, they've really started to worry that when this happens, humanity might be at risk. And they use the religious fundamentalist kind of positioning around this, that if and when this happens, we should all fear this with, kind of the fear of God, really. And that we've created a God. This God is going to potentially destroy us all. And that's the thing that I'm kind of fascinated by in relation to all of this. And I was actually talking about this before a lot of these articles came out. There's an article that came out from The Atlantic, which I think actually touches on this, where apparently internally they've been using, they have a saying, feel the AGI. They chant this. They created literally a wooden figurine representing AGI internally. And I think that the point I would like...
They burned it, right? You got to complete
they burned
people,
their deified effigy. And I guess the thing that I would say is that all fundamentalisms, and we've seen even, in the last few months, we've seen other forms of fundamentalism make grave miscalculations in terms of the actions that they take in the real world. And fundamentalisms in all of their forms, or the fundamentalist, philosophy becomes a cult, or whether a fundamentalist religion decides that it's okay to murder people on behalf of their cause, you end up making grave miscalculations. And I think that that's something we should be talking about more aggressively in the Valley, and that that's something to be discussed here.
So I couldn't agree more, Dave, that this is the fundamental thing. And the thing that is kind of wild to me is like, Sam is a fundamentalist on this, right? Like, and it's like, so it's very interesting to me that the story has become Ilya, the fundamentalist, versus Sam, the pragmatist who just wants to build a business. Because the reality is, Sam Altman, the founder, even has a private conference a year ago, not even a year ago, the story was not only is the only goal of OpenAI to build to protect against AGI, but interestingly, the way to do that is to be the first to create AGI, right? So the whole thing was actually like, which is, if you think about, I've been thinking about how to like draw this flow chart of like their actual mental model, which is like, all right, the only goal is to save humanity from AGI. The only way to save humanity from AGI is to create it first and trust us that we're the good people, because like we will have created the AGI, and like therefore we can keep it safe from bad AGI. Therefore, we must make infinite money in order to create so there's like this weird flow chart, and like somehow like the way the pieces have gotten locked in, or the stories has been told, is like, the profit part, right, is now the pragmatism is now associated with Sam, and like the fundamentalism is associated with like the board. But the reality is like Sam founded the organization and is a religious.
I think that's an excellent point, Sam. And I want to go to you, Britt, because everyone in like traditional business America, aka CNBC, love you CNBC, is like, how did this governance breakdown happen? And I think you just answered it. Like, they've been if everyone's drinking from the same like religious kind of fire hose, right, including the investors. Now, I don't know that I would put Microsoft in that camp, so maybe they complicate that, but like, that kind of goes a long way towards explaining how you could basically have four independent people with their own sort of political power struggles, with Sam, like, even overseeing this. And then a lot of people, like, and then how Sam, I mean, I just have so much reporting pointing to the fact that Sam knew he had problems with the board. And then a lot of people were like, well, why didn't he do anything about it? I think, again, if you're living in this construct of a sort of fundamentalist mentality, like, it's easier to understand why you would overlook things that now we're all wondering why they were
Well,
overlooked.
and I'll just add two things before we go to Brett, which is like, one is, everyone's like, oh, all the employees have voted, they're all pro Sam or like pro business. They've all were hired in like the last 6 months, right? Like the org is so fresh and they all came in to do the business side of it, So it's really interesting to think about like the fundamentalist foundings of OpenAI and control of it versus who now works there, which is a bunch of ex-Facebook people we all know who are just like, oh yeah, this is like clearly a good business, right? And so it's like really interesting to think about the org structure and what that even means.
Billion ARR.
Right. And so that's a piece of it. And then I also think it's just like, again, the big mistake with OpenAI, talking about fundamentalism, is they're very clever people. And the idea was to have their cake and eat it too. Right. So they set up a nonprofit board. They tell all the investors, no, not only can you not have any board seats, you can't even own a piece of the company, right? Because our mission is so important on a 1,000-year basis, and we're going to need more money than you can possibly fathom, and blah blah blah.
They did give employees equity, though.
Is it actual equity?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they certainly haven't given investors equity, right?
Well, right. But employees get equity, and in fact, one of the travesties of this is that
cap profit is not equity. Cap profit is proxy equity, right? Like that they
No, I understand. They had equity that they were in the process of selling in a secondary tender valued at $86 billion.
Interesting.
Which will not
like,
happen.
is that? I mean, I don't know the details of that, and it's interesting for me to hear because my understanding was that the whole point was that they basically the whole thing is owned by the nonprofit, right? And they've made a big point of that, right? Is that they're going to?
It's controlled by the nonprofit.
Okay, so fine. We can talk about the differences between ownership and control and what's an RSU versus whatever. But thematically, the idea was set it up in a way that the nonprofit controls everything forever with a non-economically motivated board, right? It's like hilarious. Like their disclaimers about, oh, well, this might be worth a lot of money, but money might mean nothing once we're done, right? Like it's ridiculous, over to the top marketing, right? Coupled with kind of the realities of trying to build a for-profit business. And I think it's like a lot of very overinflated egos, right? That have now gotten caught in this very weird situation.
And zealots, right? To your point. But Britt, over to you. What are you holding in your head and thinking about?
So a couple things. One, I think anytime you need a flowchart to explain how your board works and is hired, you're probably starting from a bad position. The second thing is, I feel like Satya is getting like all this credit for like saving OpenAI and like, doing the right thing. And I don't think a lot of people are recognizing like he like hit a Hail Mary and he was screwed. And like, frankly, I'm surprised that Microsoft and Sequoia and Thrive like didn't do more board diligence when they were investing all of this money to figure out like this
FTX all over again.
This board was like not adequate for the type of company that this has become. And so now, oh God, I'm going to lose $11 billion overnight. I better like figure out how to like, hit this one out of the park and get Sam to join me or else I'm screwed. And like Microsoft barely is holding on to its stock price right now, and we'll see what happens next. But I just feel like if that didn't happen, like it would be a world of trouble. And I think a lot of like fingers pointed at Satya to be like, what the hell were you doing when you invested and not like doing all this like diligence around the board itself?
Sam, well, you're waving, you're gesticulating. What would you like to say?
Look, here's the reality. $11 billion is completely irrelevant to Microsoft, right? It's a $3 trillion company, right? Like they can spend $11 billion.
That's nothing though.
No, it
like
is.
Any amount of diligence.
The thing that matters.
But guys, we're forgetting, right? So there's shareholders and they're speaking to the market, but there's also customers. And so that's a really fascinating part of what's happening because if you're Satya, you shouldn't be worried about Wall Street. You should be worried about Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, right? These customers who, when you trust and they're doing enterprise grade, millions, tens of millions probably more levels integration, multi-year. And do you want your partner to be the one who went into bed with like a hot startup-y thing that has all these issues and where you didn't even have a board seat or a board observer seat or anything of the equivalent,
Yeah,
right?
I
And
mean,
so,
to me, this is actually the key point in the miscalculation, right? What does fundamentalism do? It blinds you to the reality on the ground most often. And the reality on the ground is exactly what you said. Microsoft has enormously huge customers that are using Azure to deliver, services to their customers. The other thing that happened over the last year, and it's funny, like literally 1 year ago, I was sitting at a table with both Adam D'Angelo and Greg, and having some interesting conversations. And it's shocking to me how much has changed in 1 year, right? Like this went from being a nonprofit research organization with a lot of really, interesting ideas, definitely fundamentalist, to being the tip of the spear, not just for Microsoft and their customers, but for all of Silicon Valley. The Silicon Valley machine, once this happens, once a set of APIs emerges that becomes the focus for the entire Silicon Valley global idea, everyone starts conspiring together. And so it's not just these big customers that you refer to, Jess, it's tens of thousands of startups, right? And these startups, and we're talking billions, tens of billions of dollars of investment in startups that's going on. And all of those people's lives are also, and they're, the future of their startups are also at risk, right? And so I think the customer point can't be underestimated. And by the way, right before we started the podcast, I checked, and ChatGPT is down right now, right? And so I think
It's still
that
down right now.
you've got this thing where it's just like there's a lot of
we'll just keep
end
you updated in
customers.
real time through this pod. Yeah, no.
No, look, I agree.
And Dave, I just want to unpack. You mentioned Adam and Greg. So Adam D'Angelo, early Facebook employee who went on to found Quora, early board member at OpenAI, and all reporting obviously was deeply involved in the ouster of Sam, and is throughout all of this is sort of leading the board's negotiations with Sam. And so clearly there is a personal relationship there. But Adam, we just published today a profile of him in the information. He's a stubborn guy with deep philosophical views as well. And so,
Yeah. And I'll actually, before you jump in, let me just say one thing about Adam, since you brought him up, Jess. I've gotten a lot of calls from,
well, you brought him up, and then I brought it.
yeah,
Okay,
but I've gotten a lot of calls from people asking for my opinion about this, particularly as it relates to Adam, because Adam and I worked together for many years at Facebook. We specifically worked together on Facebook platform, the set of APIs that enabled social apps, which is another huge wave of API usage in the Valley. And I just want to say that Adam is one of the highest integrity people that I've ever worked with. He's a very principled person. And he, he's a very deliberate, very rational, very serious actor. He's a very serious person. And so it does bother me a little bit that there's a lot of speculation on the internet that Adam was doing this for, sort of vindictive or whatever reasons. I don't think that's the case. I think Adam's he's one of the smartest people I've ever had the luck to work with, and maybe even ever met. And so I just want to put that on the record as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
I would just point out the fact that, there's no question that if you think about organizing your life and organizing your work around things you can trust, right, and platforms that are trustable, that to Dave's point, I think it's the right way to think about it, which is do you want to trust American business and governance and profit motive, which is kind of how this whole thing works, right? Or do you want to trust kind of fundamentalism, right? And where are the lines between them? You bring up Facebook.
What do you which do you want to trust?
100% business. I mean, I think you talk about.
I hate to say it.
Talk about Facebook platform, because this is something that Dave and I both have generational takes on. The biggest problem with Facebook platform is the economics of it never made any sense. Right.
Yep.
And it was this idea, even that was kind of an echo boom of what we now see, where there was this idea, which is the future is social apps. The social app layer can make everything better. It's all really interesting, high-minded stuff. The problem is when you got down to brass tacks, there was this economic trade where everyone's like, oh, I know what a place with platform is. Economically, it's a way for me to get super cheap distribution and newsfeed for stuff I want to share. Great. I know what that is. The problem is that makes no sense for Facebook, right? It was like an irrational platform from that perspective. The data sharing stuff, there's this idea, oh, if we empower the world with these APIs, right, the world will be better and we'll get paid somehow and it'll all put Facebook more front and center. But the economic trade of it never made any sense. That's how you had a lot of problems, right? And so the problem I'd say is like, that was like an echo boom of what you now see with OpenAI, which is, look, the reality is large language models, there's clearly a business model to it. Like everyone can look at it, Microsoft, people like me or whatever, and be like, yep, I will pay money for answers, done, right? Like there's an economic way to think about it. And if everyone was playing that game, which Sam could be playing now, which is very different than what he said historically, right? He said, this is just a business. I can trust it. People sell it to me. I know the economics of it. It makes sense. I can therefore use it. The problem, honestly, with OpenAI is that there was always this yada, 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 which is, yeah, we'll sell you these things. It's a business. But Whisper, like, our only real goal is to make AGI, and we're going to need way more money than you've ever seen. And Whisper, like, we want to make AGI because we're making the world safe, which, by the way, it's like racing to make the dangerous thing to make the world safe is its own interesting mentality. But the basic point is that because of that, you can't trust them. And so I think the reality is like, even if they sort this out, right? Let's say they sort it out. Sam comes back. Sam now has a nonprofit board. Maybe he's replaced the people that weren't loyal to him, right? Because he was able to ramrod it through.
Oh, he won't return without.
Right. So then in some ways, that's even scarier, right? If you think about it, because then you have a religious organization. Sam is a religious zealot about this stuff, right? With a fully loyal board and no requirement to make profit, right? Like from their mental model of what they're going after, like that is even scarier, right? Than anything else. So to me, it's like, we just need a for-profit LLM company, right? And like, we need to kind of splinter out. Like if some people want to do crazy research, that's fine. This experiment of looking the other way clearly didn't work, right? And we just need to move on from it.
Do you not think that he would restructure the company in some way because of what you're saying right now?
First, I'd say
is there any way to unravel it?
Look, maybe you could theoretically figure out a way to like sell the business from underneath the nonprofit, and if someone would buy it. But the problem is like no one, either the business has to be valued very cheaply, right? Which the board would never do, right? It would make no sense to do, or like something else. But like, it's very hard to imagine the restructuring. And the problem I have is, honestly, is Sam is being painted by the media as like the business person versus the fundamentalist, but he's like as fundamentalist as it gets, right? And so like, to me, it's very hard to like imagine that being a healthy, stable situation for the future.
So, but Sam, on your point about business versus fundamentalism, right? There are obviously some technologies that, I don't know, society maybe should think about just being commercialized. Nuclear weapons being one of them, right? Now, you're obviously kind of don't think AI is as potent as nuclear weapons, but like, shouldn't we have some concerns with,
to be clear,
putting this 100% in the commercial realm, or do we think regulation will fill the gap?
We've talked about this historically, right? About the idea that we would need national science projects, and there are things like, I actually would have no problem with the Manhattan Project of AI run by the government. I think it's a pretty reasonable thing to be doing. I think that the OpenAI people and like that the fundamentalists part of AI would say, well, the government isn't doing the Manhattan Project, so we're going to do our own private foundation version of the Manhattan Project for AI. Like, I think that's actually kind of where a lot of
there's three pathways here, right? There's for-profit, nonprofit, and then government enabled.
Yeah, I'm all for government.
Oh, and then there's decentralized, right? So, I mean, talk about zealots, right? But a lot of reaction to this has been that this just shows why you can't have any centralization in the development of this, because then your technology could be subject to, the decisions of a weekly governing board.
But just those conversations about that's this sort of open source argument, which is to say, people were saying, in our back channel and all over the internet that they're super happy that there's open source models, largely because of their investing in for-profit corporations that have dependency upon these APIs. And so if these APIs had been the only APIs and there were no open source available, then all of those for-profit businesses that people have been investing in for the last 9 months would be at risk, right? So people are super worried that their investments are at risk, right?
Yeah.
And so they're happy that the open source exists because they can say, well, it's super great. This is just like Linux. We all depend on Linux for all of our websites because it runs every website server on the planet. We're super happy that happened because none of us have to worry about it ever going away, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of your open source. The open source argument is a capitalist argument, right?
Well, and I think it actually is historically the way you think about it is if you can't trust a centralized entity to this point about anything, then look, just make it all open. Bitcoin's the same way, right? Bitcoin is open source because you would never trust the security of Bitcoin to a single actor, right? And the whole beauty of it is fully open, right, as a system. And so I think that is rational. That doesn't negate if you're actually worried about AI being dangerous. It's a problem, right? So that works really well if you're a business and you just need stable platforms. You can always pull back from a service if you need to and re-implement it yourself. But if you actually believe that this is a Manhattan Project type thing, then I think the thing I think we probably all agree on is this idea of wrapping a for-profit and a nonprofit, where the nonprofit is beholden to no one and somewhat religious, and the for-profit sits inside that was hilarious and was clearly intellectually a disaster, but everyone kind of looked the other way and became a practical disaster.
Well, but Britt, so your point about a restructuring, I think, is kind of the right one, and definitely the direction of our reporting on what could that look like, and that raises a really interesting question of what mechanism is there to implement that? Because
a reverse triangular
so
merger.
what happened here is we had a poorly governing board that a CEO, Sam Altman, liked to say and said many times to me, I serve at the pleasure of the nonprofit board. I have no equity in this thing. They can fire me, yada, yada. Now, though, he's got 700-ish AI researchers and other people, right, who are basically, pardon me, software engineers.
Mostly
Thank
software
you. Is that what they do?
I mean, that's
okay. Software engineers. Is that a demeaning term, or how are you using that term? I don't know.
Again, you
people
gotta remember
who know to code using ChatGPT.
Most of the people that have joined
But
OpenAI.
let me just finish my point, right? So, this is a very uncomfortable situation. This is a very uncomfortable situation for that board because now they have a messianic leader with ground troops, right? Or and that again, you could. There's a risk, I think, here of creating a structure again that is really just shaped to the whim of those movements. Because, Microsoft certainly has leverage in this situation, but they've gone out and said, we're willing to directly compete with you and take your people and take your leader. So I don't know how much leverage they have.
Look, I would love
crazy.
For the sake of business, it would be great if Microsoft just inherited the people that want to work on this stuff and they go into a normal business structure where they're $100 billion piece of a $3 trillion company. That's the safest outcome from a business perspective, right? That makes it easy, right? It's actually better for everyone. The problem.
Do you mean for maximizing the value of the technology, or you mean for society? What are you, when you say safe, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, thinking about LLMs as a business piece of infrastructure, as cloud 2.0 technology that lots of people want to build on and has a valuable, let's put it this way, AI, not AGI, right? So for AI,
right,
the best outcome is you let someone super huge say, yep, anyone who wants to come and make money on this, anyone who wants to come and do the commercialization stuff we were doing at OpenAI, the for-profit, just come work here and we'll set you up and we'll put the guardrails in place and we have a real board and we have real governance, blah, blah, blah. The problem is, right, again, that hidden in the population of those people is a lot of people who are really actually fundamentalists about this, right? And so the problem is will they actually want to do that, or is the reality, because something has to break. Either Sam Altman has to say, you know what, all this stuff about we're building AGI and we have to do it now and first for national security reasons, and the for-profit doesn't matter, it's all about serving the nonprofit. He has to move beyond that, right, and just be nope, AI is cool technology and we're going to be a business, right? Or in some ways that's not a setup that you can even trust or make sense, right? Then you're back to the religious zealotry, right, piece of it, right?
Yeah, as the chairman, I'm the chairman of a nonprofit, and I cannot even fathom doing this. Like, I can't fathom having a for-profit entity that is controlled by the nonprofit. Like, it's just, I guess, the famous saying, no conflict, no interest, right? But like, it's just an unbelievable conflict of interest. And
So
So, why couldn't you then just do like a reverse triangular merger to like buy the?
what is that exactly?
Did you just invent that?
No, this is a real thing. You spin up a new LLC that merges with the OpenAI for-profit LLC or Inc. or whatever, and then Microsoft could fund into that, and then you can disassociate the nonprofit from the for-profit.
I also love, like, we just have to reflect on how this is back to the Kardashians, how fascinating this is, right? Because the whole reason this matters too is because this technology is so capital intensive that it can only be funded in certain ways, right? Too. So like you can't, everyone thought Sam Altman was going to go out and announce a new startup. No, he goes out and announces that he's joining Microsoft, right? Which startup people are shocked by because startup people don't really like working for other people. But again, this is just like the dynamics are so different.
Was anyone really shocked, though? I mean, it makes sense to those that are working in
In
AI.
our thread, I was going back and forth with someone who was like talking about how this was the most unreasonable thing for him to do, and how like he would need his comp reviewed by the comp committee. And I'm like, what else are you going to do?
He doesn't have any comp, first of all.
Well, but that's a problem. So this is
a problem. You're right.
It's like, yeah. I think this is the whole thing to understand about the Sam Altman saga and why it's such like the Kardashians is so interesting. Is all these things you hold up, like I'm not compensated by the company, like that's bad, right? That means that like his incentives and the reasons he's doing is like are not aligned with like the ecosystem of stability and capitalism that you want to build things on. Like I would much prefer.
And that prevented a lot of investors from investing in the tender, right? Because they saw that. Now I want to make sure we cover a couple angles of this that we haven't covered. So another element of this, Sam Altman doesn't just lead OpenAI. He runs or, is hugely involved in Helios, a big nuclear project, in WorldCoin, big crypto project. He is one of the most prolific investors in Silicon Valley. And he was pursuing 2 side projects in recent months. One, we broke in the information about building an AI phone potentially with Johnny Ive. And the second is trying to build a TSMC semiconductor, like American foundry for like American dynamism. So like this, I think, is an important part of the picture. Now, a lot of people in Silicon Valley say I overstate these, everyone has side projects, blah, blah, blah. But like,
it's a lot.
I think this is also part.
These are big side projects.
These are huge side projects, right?
These are all moonshot side projects. It's not like I made a cool app, like Sam the other day was like, I made this really cool AI app or something in my spare time. Like that was the cool side project. And Sam's like building a TSMC and a new phone with Johnny Ive. No big deal.
Well, and I think this goes back to the whole governance thing, which is
with Microsoft, right? I mean, I think if to the degree that like the chip, and I don't know this for sure, but like, again, with the big, I mean, these are legitimate questions for a board to raise, and we just don't know. Maybe they were like asked and answered.
I don't think so.
Which is why one of them. Go ahead, Sam.
I'm sure they weren't. I'm sure that this is just like it's just like it's fascinating. This like almost was like a Roman like hot like situation, like Caesarean situation where and like the problem again I think is just like unaligned actors are really hard to deal with, right? Like Elon's super hard to deal with because he's so rich, right? That he like is kind of like unaligned. He just does it's like doing whatever Elon feels like. Sam Altman is super in this really he created this structure for himself around OpenAI, right? Which basically the funny part about the line, like I serve at the pleasure of the board, is especially if you get to replace the board, then you serve at your own pleasure, right? And like that's really dangerous, right? For like any like system that, especially one that's been so religious, right? And so on the record about the kind of big structure thing. Like I just don't think that works for like capitalism. Now, I think that it's a free country. Like if people want to do that, that's fine. But like so much of the disappointment and intrigue here is this like tension between like is this a legitimate, real company that people trust and is like part of a business infrastructure of AI that people are excited about building on, right? Can Sam be the leader of that, right? Or is this a religious thing, right, that happens to have some interesting business things people got way too excited about in a terrible structure, right? And like Sam's the wrong leader for it because he actually is way too religious, right? Like,
and I will say, like, we should address, like, we've had many conversations about OpenAI and how cool their technology is and the App Store and all of
I
that,
don't think the
right?
App Store
And
is
I
that
think,
cool, but
okay, well, you hadn't followed the announcement at the time of that podcast, as our listeners have pointed out to us, for Sam not knowing what we were talking about.
well, now I
So
have, and I still think
we
it's
don't
not
always
cool.
do our homework, but I do think that, like, you know, you see those same. So prior to this, obviously, we had the APEC conference with a lot of important U.S. and China trade conversations, and I was reading something about a dinner Sam Altman showed up to, and someone compared him to Taylor Swift showing up, right? And I think there is just, you know, the press has a role to play, and you know, fingers should be questioned and challenged as well, right? When we think about how we cover these people, and you know, we've a while ago did an article about Sam's investments and how he said they were slowing down in OpenAI, and they just weren't, right? And like, we got so much flack for that piece of just like, why are you going after the guy and stuff? It's like, we're not going after the guy, but like, you know, he says one thing and the picture's different, right? And so anyway, we're seeing some of those same, you know, the things we saw with FTX. You know, these forces are in play too, I think,
I
for bringing
think,
us this moment. But
just to your point, the difference here is that this technology is so powerful and we're all customers of it. I think that's the thing that is so interesting about this, is that this,
yes, I agree.
deservedly so, the reason that perhaps the Taylor Swift analogy has happened is that the, you know, the power of the technology and that it's become a thinking partner for all of us is like this incredibly powerful thing. And
Maybe.
we're all trying to figure out what exactly this thing is, right? Like, and to me, that's the thing about the question about how religious this thing is. How dangerous is this thing? Like, what is this, right? Like, is it a
But do you guys have a single portfolio company that would die if OpenAI went away, right? Like, I would have to revert my search to the way it was 2.5 months ago on the information, right?
Well, there are other AI platforms. Yeah. It
Yeah, I
feels a
just
little
don't.
like how everyone was diversifying their bank accounts when the SVB thing happened. And now it's just like, make sure to diversify your API calls so that like no
100%.
single AI platform can get you in trouble.
Well, and I think the other way to think about it, like Dave, is like, I just think there's another way to look at it, which is like the Valley needs a story desperately, right? And like, I'm like less bold. I think LLMs, like, they're really cool, very obvious applications. There'll be a lot of money made. I don't think it's like the second coming of anything. I just think it's like cool business cloud 2.0 stuff. But the Valley desperately needs a narrative, right? Because so many of them hasn't panned out. It's been a long time since we've had one. And so to me, like, the real question about like this cultdom or whatever is like, and like where we're at is like, it's less about like, oh, this technology is so powerful versus like the industry really, really wants a narrative, right? And like, this was supposed to be it. And the fact that it's a mess from a business perspective, and the fact that, you know, it's quasi-religious, and the fact that we can't tease out whether this is a business operation or, you know, a religious zealotry, you know, situation, I think is the real problem, right?
But I
It
think
shows
it's
how
also
far
that like we're sad. Like I think the thing I've been hearing and seeing and I feeling is just like, gosh, we haven't seen another $1 trillion tech company in
Yeah.
so many years, and like this was the one we all were putting our money on, and some of us literally, and like now what, you know, and what does that mean for the future of Silicon Valley, and so, you know, I don't know what if it'll come back to the extent that
but there's also a bigger question, which is how dangerous is this really? Like, and I think that's what this comes down to. Like, the religious disagreement is around how it's all subjective, right? Like, nobody can define a really truly objective danger situation. There's just a lot of like, well, I think this is what's going to happen, and I think
to be
that's why it's. Go ahead, Sam.
Well, I just think I also think look, the way I always think about it is I actually think AI technology is super dangerous. I think it's gonna completely fuck with our election cycle. I think it's incredibly hard to tell what's real or not. But we don't need AGI for that. I think that's the big difference. I think AI technology is plenty dangerous. Doesn't mean it isn't plenty cool or plenty valuable. It's also plenty dangerous. And to me, the religious thing is the yada 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 of the AI danger, and being no, 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 AGI. That's the religious thing that people are into. And I understand it's super cool to feel like you're working on the Manhattan Project. It's a great marketing story. There's all these positive things that I think a lot of people get out of convincing them to be in the cult, right, so to speak. But I don't think it's real. I think it's invented. And the thing that worries me again is specifically Sam Altman, because he is, for better or worse, he's put himself at the absolute center of this, right? Is there's Sam Altman, the business person, totally reasonable, get it, fine, whatever. But then his rhetoric for years has been Sam Altman, the cultist, and I just don't know that, especially after
He's Sam Altman, the pragmatist, I think he was cultish because it was pragmatic to
I
be
know, but isn't that
cultish,
a
right?
problem?
And also,
Isn't that a problem that he's willing to be
of course, that's a problem.
I don't know.
It's a problem, and I think Sam Altman wants to and believes he is the next Elon Musk. He was friends with Elon. Elon actually started OpenAI as a nonprofit. Their tensions between them led to Elon leaving, among other things. But
I don't know. He doesn't have
when
enough children to
Elon,
be Elon.
it's true. But it's, and again, I don't know if that's necessary. Of course we want to look up to amazing technologists and all that kind of stuff. But there's kind of something off about it. And he's pragmatic. He's a fabulous investor. I think that is, if you look at his objective business sense, success to date, that's what it was, right? He's not the guy who scales up your 1,000-person team to tackle these big issues, but he's very smart in terms of thinking 10 steps ahead, sort of.
I guess
Didn't see this
that's
coming.
there's this question to me.
Sorry,
It's
Dave.
what is this? I guess I keep coming down to this, which Sam, you've said, you heard somebody compare LLMs to no better than a slide rule, right? A saying that has been on my mind is that, is that, another quote that I heard from a dear collaborator is, one cannot see a star through a microscope and one cannot see a cell through a telescope. Right. And so the lenses which we see focusing they're both focusing and limiting at the same time. And so this technology we've created, is it a slide rule? Is it Photoshop for text? Is it, glorified autocorrect? Is it, what is this thing? And what perspective is it providing us? And will it actually ever become, this all powerful thing? To me, that's what we're all wrapped up in here. And we're also all kind of using it, interacting with it. And so it's causing this, to me, that's why this story has become so big, not just that it's this narrative that we're all grabbing onto.
So I want to bring us to a conclusion with two questions for each of you. The first, you're the OpenAI board. Based on what you know so far, do you vote for or against Sam Altman as CEO of OpenAI?
Wow.
Didn't prep this one. Didn't prep it. Sam Lessin, you first in the hot seat.
So it's interesting because I think it actually comes down to how religious are they, right? The short term.
No, you, Sam Lessin, are in that seat. What do you do?
If I'm in the seat, I don't bring them back, right?
You don't.
Why not? I say it's the ring of power. I threw it away, and hopefully, and the reason I do that honestly is I think that any structure that he'll be able to work in next and that moves LLMs forward, like Microsoft, will be a dramatically more constrained structure, which forces it to be a good business application, but does my actual primary goal, which is push out the AGI thing, because it won't fund it. Microsoft's not going to fund AGI. And I accept the fact that the Chinese or some other yahoos are probably working on it. But I also have enough respect for the talent that we put together that if I really believe the AGI story, which they clearly do, that I've kind of thrown away the ring of power.
Okay, Britt.
I think I bring him back, but I create a new set of checks and balances that actually work to try to meet as many expectations as possible. And I just think the Microsoft thing is going to get really messy really fast with like the Microsoft shareholders, the public company, all the inter-organization stuff. Like I know Satya said it's going to be arm's length. I just don't buy into that. And so I don't see us making the progress that we need to make if he doesn't come back.
Okay, Dave.
The one question that I have is, what information don't we know? And this goes back to my comments about Adam. I think there's something we don't know. Like, my intuition is that there's still something we don't know. And so I'm going to make my comments based on what we do know. If there's something we don't know, which is, who knows? There's, an AGI system that appeared in the last 2 weeks that, told them something really scary, or there's some, who knows, some crazy.
There was that. We do know that, by the way, or we know that the religious leaders who use this as a tactic of cultdom have been telling us that they saw something that, for the first time, that blew their mind, only like their mind had been blown twice in history before, since the dawn of man.
Well, maybe
I believe that was a direct quote.
What a great way to sell business services.
All right. And my only other caveat.
Okay, but what does Dave vote?
My other caveat is, if there's something else dark and, crazy that went on with data or something like that. If that happened, then my vote would be the opposite direction. But my vote would be to put him back, to vote him back in. And I would do that with the creation of a, if it's going to stay a nonprofit or, whatever, I would do a 2-board structure. The board that I run is a 2-board structure based on the Harvard Corporation and based on the Rockefeller Foundation, which effectively has a one board that is the managing board. And that board has to send all potential nominees to the board up to the, what I think of it like a Supreme Court board that kind of plays the role of making sure that the managing board can't become captive. And there should be some kind of structure like that provides a true, like, quite literal check and balance structure in place, so that we can all trust that the governance of this situation, given if it is as important of a technology as we're all saying, can be protected.
Jess, what do you
guys? There's some breaking news. I will answer that question, but I gotta break. I'm reading a combination of breaking news here. Hold on. Okay, basically more about bickering between the board.
No.
Are you reading published news or unpublished news?
I know, shocking. Hold on, I just want to make sure. I think there's very little new here. Hold on.
It's such a cliffhanger. You could like tie.
No,
the
I
vote.
know. Well, guys, this is just my life. It's messages of people claiming.
I do have to say,
that
Jess, you've really just absolutely knocked it out of the park the last few days.
Oh, thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. It's putting this board member, Helen, more in the spotlight. And so, well, as a source of kind of beef with Sam, which is something that we know.
Why hasn't there been more coverage of these other board members? We're all talking about Sam and all of Adam, because we know these people, but I haven't seen much about. Yeah.
No, but there's a lot. So there's a lot of like who these people are. But I think now where we are in day whatever of this cycle is the board is finally realizing that they should find a way to get some of their story out there.
Totally.
I'm not saying they're not doing this directly, but they are
clearly whatever AGI
they're just starting to like realize that there's kind of more to this. So okay, but I want to keep this going. I would not bring Sam Altman back in anything that resembled the current structure. Is there a structure where I would bring him back? Possibly, but I think that like the whole thing is you will just have this perpetually kind of every 6 months, especially since this is all triggered from research papers. So
so we have a traditional more and less in breakdown. The more and we
no, actually, no. We all said the same thing. Me, you, and Dave, Jess, said we would bring him back with a new structure. That's what I heard.
Yeah, but like, I'm not talking about like corporation oversee. I'm like, I can't even imagine what the situation is, but
I think the real solution should
I
be
don't know. I think Sam's on his own right now.
the profit
Oh, come
people,
on.
the people.
that I feel aligned with both the Morons and the Lessons in this moment.
Aw.
I think we're all pretty pragmatic here.
We have one more question.
Okay.
You are Sam Altman. What do you do? Sam Lesson.
I go hang out at Microsoft for a while.
You're done with the drama.
No, I think that like the reality is this got real messy for me, and I do have a bunch of different angles and projects on this, and I think it's super easy for me to pull a bunch of resources in through and build a bunch of interesting stuff through Microsoft, and you go from there. I would most importantly in that, I think it would be a real sign of dropping the AGI religious act. Like I think if you took a year of dropping it, right, and was like, okay, like this is business technology and like there's some projects I want to work on, that you can kind of get the stink off of that. But to me, I think the real problem is I don't think you can have it both ways and be a religious leader with these AGI cult stuff and like the fear of AI and racing for a nuclear weapon, and also be building a pragmatic business platform. And as you guys all know, like I think this is a very good pragmatic business platform, full stop.
Brett.
I could never imagine if Sam is like Elon going to work for Microsoft and like not doing one of his many projects.
No, but I want to know if you're you. You're Britt Morin and you're faced with these set of
Sam
facts.
Altman.
What do you want to do?
Oh, well, I don't think I would.
But like,
okay, I got it.
You're in Sam's position as Britt Morin.
I know.
We're not trying to guess his next move.
I'm Russian dolling this by saying if Britt Morin is Sam Altman and Sam Altman is Elon Musk, I don't think I would want to be working at Microsoft, because I would have so much complexity around what I can and can't do, and my other side projects, and all my investing against all messy. I don't know.
Your buddy Satya was willing to hire your whole company overnight. You have a lot of leverage.
You just say, I'll do whatever I want, but I'll work at Microsoft.
I think that's how Satya sells you on it. And then like 2 years in, it starts getting weird.
You're not going to stay for 2 years. You're going to stay for 12 months. You're going to stay for 12 months.
So you think he's only there for 12 months and then he rolls out?
Absolutely.
Oh my God. Okay, well, if I'm only there for 12 months, I'm in. But I don't think he's going to fulfill his dream of what he wants to do in 12 months' time. So I'm probably not in Microsoft.
No. You just give Microsoft the keys to the business side of AI as it is today. You help them set it up. You bring in the people who want to be business people. You package it. You're the hero who brought AI to Microsoft.
Oh, and then you bounce.
Then you bounce. And in the meantime, you do your stupid phone project and whatever else, because like Satya's not going to stop
with
you.
Johnny Ive, hilariously with Johnny Ive. While I'm a Microsoft employee, Steve Jobs is rolling in his grave right now. You guys, this is insane.
And you just distance yourself. You just distance yourself from this madness for a year. You take a time out and you say, look.
It's impossible. You can't take a time out. Come on.
You take a time out and say, look, it was a dumb setup. It was a dumb board. It was a dumb set of messages around AGI and safety. I only did it to recruit a bunch of people. I realized that was a mistake. And like we did some really cool stuff. And now I'm going to go make a shitload of money doing whatever I want to do.
Dave, I'm curious your answer here.
I do. My answer is actually pretty simple. I do whatever it takes to keep my team together.
Aww.
I think that look, we're all founders. We've all built companies. It's incredibly hard to put a team together that's firing on all cylinders. I don't care what anybody says. That's really, 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 really hard. And they built this team that clearly has a lot of loyalty and a lot of incredible creative energy. I mean, Jess, your point earlier was right that, maybe not all startups are fully dependent on this technology, but GPT-4 is the best technology right now. And they brought together a team that really made this happen. And it's super hard to build that. And so I'm doing whatever it takes, to keep my team together and to keep it all, going, keep the music going. And then the second thing I'm doing, which I think we've talked about quite a bit, is I'm flowing to where the maximum access to the chips and the capital is in order to do this. And I do think that Microsoft is probably, let's say Apple showed up, and said they'd play ball here. Maybe I'd consider that. They've got chip making capabilities. They can do their own stuff. They've also got the same war chest. But at the end of the day, Microsoft, I've already got the OpenAI model embedded in the Azure cloud. There are already customers using it. And you've got the commitment of Satya, who's one of the best CEOs and leaders in the world. And so, and by the way, Microsoft also has a really good, I think, a really good reputation and history of allowing kind of the subsidiary companies such as Mohang and Minecraft and LinkedIn and many of these things they've acquired sort of operate as their own going concerns. And so I'm not as worried about control issues as a lot of people I've heard talking about this. I think that the Microsoft way, if it's the way to keep my team together and continue to get access to the stream of capital, then I'm doing it, right? If I can maintain my Microsoft relationship and the capital flow and the Azure sort of build out, and I can stay over at OpenAI with a better structure, I'm doing that. And you know what? I'm actually, if I'm in this position, I am actually trying to make a board structure that the world can trust more. Because I've been part of platforms like this. I've seen this play out. I've seen how frustrated people get when APIs change and people can't trust what's going on. And so I'm actually arguing to create a better board structure that can produce a higher level of trust.
So if I am in the same position as Sam Altman, I do not go back to OpenAI because you do it, you are under a microscope. Like, what is your career, right? Like, you have, maybe you assume that people will kind of forget about this, but like, what is the set of conditions in terms of boards and investors and scrutiny and politics and regulation that you're kind of like operating under, right? So if you still believe in the mission, which you say you do, but you also believe in a lot of other things. So like, it's hard to know where this stacks, right? But like, go do it at Microsoft in the short term or find a way to work with great people and drive it forward. But like, one of the major lessons in all of this, right? FTX didn't have a board either, had like an advisory party council. Is like the structure matters, right? And the set of and beyond that now, there's just too much scrutiny. There are going to be hundreds, thousands of reporters and editors who want to catch you in every move, or you've had all your dirty laundry aired about all your kind of internal debates in your organization. And that's just not a great thing. Like entrepreneurs like avoid that for the sake of doing something else. So, that's not necessarily what I think he will do, but that's what I would do. So, what else have we've covered it all?
We covered it all, and go ahead.
I'd say, I think that it's about governance and it's about incentives, right? And I just think the reality is people like to shit on capitalism and they like to shit on this type of stuff, but there's rational business platforms I think are much easier for people to handle. The reality is with technology in general, you can actually do something kind of wild, which you can have huge impact with a small number of people. With AI, it's even a smaller number of people. It's a tiny, it can produce incredibly impactful, interesting things. And the thing that happens when you cut down the size or whatever is you're able to get, crazy people to coordinate in very non-continuous directions. That can produce great outcomes. That's actually a really powerful tool. That is the free radical of Silicon Valley in a lot of ways. It creates a lot of great outcomes, but it also creates a lot of very dangerous situations. It's the speed and scale with small numbers of people that you can align on things. So to me, I think the FTX call it's right. And it's not just about governance. It's also just about fundamental alignment and the speed at which these things grow up. And them getting way too important with way too few guardrails too quickly at this point. So, I think that's just kind of the reality we now live with. And, it's kind of a wild future in a lot of ways, but I do think we got to be really careful about who you trust. And it goes back to things to me, I think the big winners on this are Microsoft, actually, despite the challenges of eyes. It's Amazon. It's going to be Google. It's going to be we know how to think about and trust these entities as players. And yes, we'll use multiple of them, right? And so I think it's just going to be you can't trust these crazy, weird structure startups from nowhere.
Yeah. Okay. With that, everyone, to our listeners, viewers, we wish you a great Thanksgiving. We hope that you don't stay glued to X and WhatsApp and whatever other things through
it's so fun,
all
though.
of it. But
And we hope we don't have to do, we don't have to, hope we don't have
but
to
you
do
should
another.
stay glued to the information.com. Like you should just put that at your Thanksgiving table,
And
refreshing
subscribe.
it, download
Jess,
the app.
why don't you guys have like a live feed update situation? That's what I want from the
We have
information.
a lot going. I mean, it's just there's a lot, and there's been excellent.
I need the
coverage from many
information
outlets, but
live. That's what I need. The information live.
Dave, you basically get the information live. What are you
That's
talking
fair.
about? As soon as it's confirmed, as soon as it's published, you know.
I mean,
but,
CNBC. Yes, you've been on. How many times did you go on CNBC yesterday?
so many times. By the end, the I think Frank, my good friend in the control room, was like, "It's nice to see you again. I'm still here." And it was like by the end, last night, I didn't even know what I was wearing. I looked down at one point and I was like, I don't think I can wear this on television. So then I paused and they went to commercial break and then I changed my shirt. But
I love that, by the way, you had a 2-year-old birthday party somewhere in between all of this weekend. So, like, congrats.
I think and a Friendsgiving, many other things, but it's an important story. There is other news. I mean, we just broke a scoop about Tiger's head of private investments stepping aside for all of you guys who know Scott. So we'll keep it going.
Did you put OpenAI in the headlines? People would click on it.
We didn't put OpenAI in the headlines.
It should be like Tiger, a non-investor in OpenAI. Right?
There are outlets that would do that. To the Morans, we wish you guys a very happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving,
and
guys.
we'll see you next week for another episode.
Did you speculate that the Tiger guy would be the
less.
new CEO? Because that would also work.
Okay. That's why you don't write the headlines. We'll work at the newsroom. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
If you enjoyed this show, please leave us a virtual high five by rating it and reviewing it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Find more information about each episode in the show notes and follow us on social media by searching for @MoreOrLess, @DaveMorin, @Lesson, @JLesson, and as for me, I'm @Brit. See you guys next time.